Hi, it's John Labman of the Liberation Laboratory, and today I want to talk about what liberation produces. And in the last video, I was talking about what I think that we were misled to think would happen. And this time, I want to talk about what actually changes in the left brain and the right brain in your humanity as the liberation process goes forward. When I teach liberation, I teach basically two parts, a left brain and a right brain part. I never defined it that way until recently, but first you need to be able to deal with your humanity, your left brain, your thoughts, your feelings, your physical sensations. And then in the midst of that, you can learn to access your right brain through meditation and mindfulness and being present in the moment, and through all kinds of other spiritual practices that people do, which basically all move us into present moment awareness, the awareness of the right brain, where there really doesn't feel like a separate person here. There really doesn't feel like any separation between me and anything else. There doesn't really feel like any sense of time, which seems to be very much a left brain construct. And where, in a sense, the desire to live in present moment awareness begins to overtake the desire to live in our brains and in our reactivity, in our minds rather, in our reactivity. The brain is this whole thing. The mind I think of as a subset of the brain that produces language, and sometimes I call it the language generating mind. The thing is that once we reach the ages about 3 or 4, we start to feel as if all of our attention is really being directed toward words and verbal representations of the experience of three-dimensional reality. And by the time we enter school, we're really being, dare I say, programmed, but really pushed into lots of thinking and lots of analyzing and lots of parsing and separating this from that. And okay, that's how we navigate three-dimensional reality. I need to know that this is a cup full of water, and that if I tip it in a certain way, it's going to ruin my expensive computer and my camera equipment and soak me. Okay, so there's a usefulness about that. And yet, what happens is we get more and more distant from felt reality that we feel with our senses: taste, touch, sight, sound, smell, proprioception, which is position of body in space, vestibular sense, which is a sense of balance. All those 7 senses, we get kind of distance from those, and we learn to live in thoughts more and more and more. We learn to separate from sense, because a lot of times we don't like the senses that we're feeling, particularly when we're feeling some kind of physical pain or feeling some sort of emotional pain. So we tend to begin to dissociate from felt sense of reality by going to thought and words and more thoughts and more words. And I call this non-sense, because it isn't our sense experience at all. It is separated by a little bit of time from actual sense experience. And then thought is abstracted and abstracted and abstracted. And the older we get, the more abstraction we put into our thought. And that thought also creates, especially with any thought that is subjectively false, it also creates a lot of anxiety, anger, and sadness. Not that those don't arise from other circumstances, but a lot of times thought, especially false thought, creates a lot of negative emotion, and that's a physical sensation, a set of physical sensations. And then we're endlessly trying to think of a new thought to get rid of the old thought that seems to be tied to the physical sensations or emotions that we don't like. In the process of liberation, we have to learn how to access and deal with our thoughts and our feelings, determine where emotion is coming from, if at all possible, and often it is possible to determine what's happened that produces the emotion, or what thought has produced the emotion. And in a sense, kind of getting familiar with your humanity is part of the liberation process. You need to know, what is this mechanism called John over here, or whatever your name is over there. What is it called? What is it about? Why is it that my spouse can eat really spicy foods, but if I eat really spicy foods, I'm sick to my stomach? And how do I deal with my own individual uniqueness as a human being? Very genetically unique, very unique in sense of my environment and in sense of my nurturing or lack of nurturing in many cases. And, the other thing is that nobody teaches us growing up, because they don't know anything about it either. Nobody teaches us how to name and feel our emotions. What are these emotions even about? What are they composed of? Well, emotions are composed of physiological or physical sensations, usually along the midline of the body, along the vagus nerve. We don't even know that, let alone do we know how to label the emotion, let alone do we even know how to track where it comes from. So all of that, I think, is important in the liberation process. I have to be liberated by understanding what this body, mind, and emotional life is all about, how it works, what causes it distress, what causes it pleasure. Also, however, I've got to learn that this left brain chattering voice in the head that we call I or me, that sometimes is called the ego, is not the final arbiter of reality. And my memories are not an accurate representation of all of reality. They're just from one very subjective point of view. And my ideas about myself, others, and the future are 90 to 95% of the time lies. They're not even true. In some way or another, they're inaccurate. Now, maybe lies is a strong word for some of you, but it's really helpful when you start to deal with your mind and all the thoughts that it automatically generates, because there's nobody in there cranking those thoughts out like it's a factory. They just show up. We don't even know how that happens, really. But we still have to deal with that, okay? And what happens in the awakening process, in the liberation process, is we learn to deal with all of that stuff. We learn to deal with our humanity. And that mostly I see as left brain stuff. In the right brain, however, we've got to reaccess the right brain because we've been pulled into the left brain, away from the right brain, where all of our sense of love and bliss, compassion, contentment, freedom, creativity, peace, all of that is in the right brain. Our connection to all the rest of it, right? What we sometimes call the universe or the divine or God or Buddha nature, or, I use so many words for this, the Tao, all of that really seems to be accessed through the right brain, as I've discovered by reading the author Jill Bolte Taylor. And now recently, also reading Martha Beck. Sorry about these names. It's a Friday afternoon, so I'm a little whiffy at this moment. But I want to bring some of these resources to you as well, because they were very helpful to me. What I understand is that the right brain has all the spiritual wonderfulness, all the yumminess that everybody wants when they go on the spiritual path. And so we do have to learn to access the right brain and learn how to stay in a right brain focus, if you will, which we do with meditation and mindfulness, and which after a lot of practice in a number of years is really where we prefer to live as we get more and more liberated, because the left brain creates all kinds of trouble out of nothing just by making up thoughts. The right brain tends to just sit with what is, get curious and creative with it, and accept it. And, I'd much rather live mostly there than I would in a left brain that's always kind of drumming up new thoughts to create more drama and more trouble in my life. So the liberation process, as I see it, is not trying to get rid of the left brain, which is how I originally envisioned it and how it's often taught, but it's to see that the right brain is where we can live most of the time, that produces all the wonderful attributes we want, a sort of a loss of reactivity, because we stop believing all the nonsense in the left brain and we're just curious about what's happening in front of us. So we become less reactive. We stop believing that our minds should be able to dictate the way reality shows up. And even in the Buddhist fetter work, that's really the process that you're going to undergo if you do that. You're going to notice that your mind has a preference about everything that shows up and usually disagrees with how reality or God is presenting reality to us. So a lot of liberation is also getting used to the idea that this has got a lot of bullshit going on in it. And if you listen to this and you think you should be reacting based on the alleged truthfulness of your thoughts, you're going to be a pretty miserable person. So I see liberation as the process of first learning how to navigate your humanity in the left brain, then returning to the right brain, which we've kind of been yanked away from since we were 4 or 5 years old, and learning how to live most of our lives settled in the non-reactive, compassionate, creative, curious, present moment awareness state of the right brain. However, again, the left brain doesn't go away and you can't get rid of it, and that's not part of the awakening process. What you do want, however, is to notice that it's only useful for some things, and that this word-based person that you think you are is only a tiny fraction of what you actually are. You're using words to try to put the ocean in a glass of water, in a sense. You're reducing yourself to this set of repetitive words and then defending yourself when somebody uses different words to describe you. And all of that can start to disappear and dissipate as you awaken and come into a condition of more and more enlightenment or liberation. So, at the risk of making these things too long, it's already 12 minutes, I'm going to stop there. Wherever you're doing, I hope you have a wonderful day. And I hope you discover the brilliance of your humanity, especially as it's subsumed to or in service to the divinity that you really are. All blessings from here. Bye now.